So welcome. Apologize for we had a little time mix up, but we are glad that some of you stuck around. So thank you, and we can certainly offer additional office hours in case we don't get to everything today. So I am Jessica Spybrook. I'm a program officer with the BCSER program, and I am joined by a few other program officers. So I will let them hop off the mic and say hi real quick as well. Jennifer, you want to go ahead?
Hi, I'm Jenny Lewis. I'm a program director in the Division of Undergraduate Education.
Hey everyone, I'm Jolene Jesse. I am a program director in the Division for Research on Learning.
Hi everyone, I'm Merrick Gruzik, and I'm a new program director in the Division of Research on Learning with Jolene and Jessica.
Great, thank you. So I am just going to do a very short overview for folks, and then we are going to open it up for questions. So we are obviously here to talk about the BCSER Institute solicitation, which is, all about, BCSER is all about building capacity. So we have a couple of different opportunities within BCSER, but here we're specifically going to focus on the Institute. So the Institutes in Methods and Practice, the goal of this is to support investigators with knowledge and expertise to design and implement institutes to provide training and support for STEM education, research methodologies, and practices. So the idea here is we are supporting institutes that range across a variety of topic areas, and we'll put into the chat a link to actually within the ECR Hub that has a list of the current BCSER institutes that are funded, so you can take a look at that. That just kind of offers you a sense of the different types of institutes we have funded in the past. These institutes are funded for a maximum of 3 years with a maximum of $1 million. The idea behind the institutes is really to provide an opportunity for folks in the field to learn new skills, basically. So they may be cutting edge methodological techniques or practices that will somehow advance the participants' knowledge, skills, and competencies related to STEM education research. So we are happy to share these slides, and then you'll be able to, this is the link to the hub that I was talking about, and we'll drop that in the chat so that you can see, what some of our current institutes are. A few kind of overall or overview tips about preparing a institute proposal. So if you're used to writing NSF proposals, I can tell you writing an institute proposal is probably very, very different than any proposal that you have written to NSF in the past, because the whole goal of these types of proposals is different. So what we've done here is just highlight some of the important pieces that you would want to be sure to include in your proposal. So, for example, I'm just going to briefly walk through this list here. So you would want to tell us about who are the target participants for your particular institute, and how would you go about recruiting them? What are your plans for recruitment? What are the specific methods and or practices that you are going to teach folks? So in other words, what is the purpose of your institute, and what kind of skills are folks going to come away with that they didn't have coming into this? It's important to include some evidence that shows that, this is in demand. So this is an area where folks would want to come and to continue to gain skills in. You want to show how this is relevant to the BCSER program goals. So in other words, definitely spend some time with the solicitation there. Highlight what the scope and the significance of this particular institute. So why is this institute really important? How is this particular institute really going to help move the field? I always think of this next one, the detailed description of the curriculum, training plan, schedule of activities, expected outcomes. If you're a faculty member, I think of this as like, oh, it's kind of like a syllabus, right? So I'm writing out all those things that I would be doing for a class, because in some ways an institute certainly has, some of those similar type goals. You would want to include a description of you and your team and how and why you are prepared to run this institute. And then the last thing on here is mechanisms to assess the success of the project. So in other words, what are the ways that if you're doing an institute and you're training cohorts of individuals, how are you going to learn, for example, from cohort 1 before you move to cohort 2? So some formative assessment, as well as overall program outcomes and outcomes of participants who go through the institute. So what we want to do with the rest of the time that we have together is we want to open this up for questions. However, I want to put a little caveat on there so that we're all on the same page about kind of what these big picture office hours look like. So the idea here is for us to answer questions about the BCSER solicitation, kind of the overall goals and things like that. If you have an individual proposal that you are thinking about submitting to BCSER, that's great. And the best way for us to give you feedback on your individual ideas is for you to send a one-page description to this email alias right here. So that will come to us. And then as program officers, we kind of see, okay, who has the relevant expertise in a particular area. And that particular program officer will get your one-page summary, and then we'll set up a meeting with you to talk through it. It really enables a nice one-on-one opportunity, which is different than, kind of this larger office hours where there's several people in here. And so we want to make sure that we're helping to address questions that are going to be kind of overall helpful around BCSER Institute. So with that, I am going to stop sharing my screen. And I don't know if Jennifer, Jolene, Eric has anything to add before we open up the floor. Doesn't look like it. So we do have a small group, so you are welcome to, raise your hand. We can call on folks if you feel more comfortable putting your question in the chat. You're certainly welcome to do that too. But I will just stop talking and give some wait time here so that we can get some questions from you all. Lin.
Yeah, my name is Lin Lee. I'm a researcher at VestEd, a research organization, headquartered in California. I have a question about this one page because I do have an idea and I would like to chat more about it. For this one page, do you want us to focusing on what the primary content we want to cover and who will be the facilitator or some of I guess we don't have the time to the space to add the details, but like the broader things related to content and who will be the provider?
Sure, absolutely. Good question. So the one-pagers can kind of differ, but I would certainly encourage you to give us, a couple sentences about what this is about. You can, identification of the team members is great. You can talk about, you can kind of think of some of these bullets. You could talk about who you are aiming to serve with this particular institute. We recognize that it is one page, right? And so you don't have the opportunity to say a whole lot, which is why we like to have conversations with folks and kind of talk through that in more detail. So, give us a sense of basically what you're kind of planning to do, and then we would follow up with that communication.
If I could add, for what it's worth, often I get one pagers and I find this helpful where there's just a paragraph overview and then there's a statement about the intellectual merit, which is sort of why is this important for people to learn this thing? And then there's a statement about broader impact, which is sort of how will this help BCSER meet its goals to build capacity across the nation? So I think that can be another frame. Or you could go down that bulleted list that Jessica went through and just try to get answers to those questions in one page. But it's really up to you. The idea is to make sure that the program officer you're talking with isn't coming in cold. They have some idea so that they have a better conversation with you.
Hi,
Crystal, yeah.
I'm Crystal. I work for the Center for Open Science. We are considering a proposal for an institute on specifically data management and sharing practices to help researchers who are going to need to be filling out DSMPs and stuff like that for federal funding and maybe honing in on folks that are less likely to have resources at their institutions. So folks that aren't at R1 institutions, for example, where there may not be like a specific staff person that is tasked with helping with this. And one of the things that we're running into that we're kind of curious about your guys' perspective on is like what the scope of an institute should be in terms of like how many people we're reaching, because we can design it where we're doing like really intensive stuff with like 10 people a year, or we could, try to reach like 500 people a year or something, like there's like a whole range of intensity and design around that. And so I was just curious, like, I know there is a wide variety of the institutes and how they do things, but what might be of interest for NSF folks?
I'm happy to give you my perspective, but then I welcome my colleagues to jump in as well. That's a great question, Crystal. And I think you actually kind of hit it right there when you said it depends on the level of intensity. And so that's what we see. So there are some institutes that train 10 to 15 participants a year, and they might have multiple cohorts, right? That's on our smaller end is what I would generally say. And those tend to be, very intense and, whether it's methods, practices, more detailed, more complicated type of thing. And so the ability to train large numbers, is just not going to work for certain types of methods, for example. On the other end, we have folks who, their goals may be more about, introducing particular concepts to communities, right? And so they may have a model that is very different in the sense of, it's looking to train large numbers of folks in terms of, getting them into a topic area and then perhaps helping them move towards more advanced methods or, directing them in other ways. So there's no answer to that. I know that's very unsatisfying, but I would say that you really want to think about matching up the scope of what you're trying to do to what makes sense in terms of number of participants.
And if you're happy to have me add to that, I agree with everything my colleague has just said. And we have institutes that even kind of do both things. They have a really intense cohort, and then they have a level of materials that are developed in that process that are made available online for an introduction to a topic. So it really depends on, what is the expertise of the project team, what can they deliver, and what is the nature of the argument for why the particular approach will really be helpful for BCSER meeting its goals. If you're going to train 10 people at the same institution, that may have less of a national impact. I say may, I don't know for sure, but it may have less of a national impact than 10 people at, a range of institutions that are carefully thought through. So reviewers are typically looking for not only who's the audience, but also why are they the audience?
Thank you.
Yes. Hi, Sen. Sorry if I mispronounced your name.
Yeah, no worry. Shane and Mark. Hello, everyone. I'm from University of Massachusetts Law, and thank you for your time to offer this office hour. So my question is about the budget justification. So could you tell tell us more about like are there specific budget expenses that are commonly misaligned with the program expectation? So for example, can we, yeah, I mean, this is kind of new to me, like the budget justification could be different from what I used to have for the research project. Could you give me more sense about the budget justification? What can be budget, if that makes sense?
Do you want me to start on this one or go ahead, Jolene?
No, I was just gonna say, I think one of the things that are expected, and Jenny and Jessica can correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the things that is expected is participant support costs. So anybody who's going to be coming to your institute if you're giving them a stipend, if you are paying for their travel, if you are paying for hotel, if you're paying for food while they're at the training, that should be all under participant support costs. And I think at least as long as if it's a totally virtual thing, then that's maybe different. But otherwise, we do kind of expect that there will be participant support costs in your budget.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to add, I would say oftentimes that is like the big budget line, right? Particularly depending on how many folks you might have coming and how long they're coming for. We've had a lot of institutes that have multiple components, right? So they may have an in-person component as well as virtual components throughout the year, virtual meetups, virtual mentoring, different models like that. But factoring in that time and resources for folks is really important.
Hi everyone, this is George from the University of Minnesota. Thanks for hosting this. I see in the slide that you shared prior that there's mention of including evidence of prior success. And I was wondering sort of what that refers to. Does it refer to offering a similar institute of smaller scale in the past? Does it refer to being successful in obtaining NSF funding? So what is the scope of success that you're looking for there?
Sure, George. So let me just highlight for other folks, that was on one of the bullets. It said description of organization or investigators' capabilities, evidence of prior success, and detailed project management plan. And it can take many forms. So, some folks coming in may have already done a small scale version of a particular workshop, right? That's related to the institute. So if you have, evidence from that, that's great to include. Not everyone will have done this in a, prior venue. And so other forms of evidence certainly can be included. I've seen multiple different types of like creative forms of evidence too, right? So you're trying to make the case that your team has the skills and the capabilities to be able to successfully implement this institute. So, I can imagine a variety of different ways that you might do that. And there's no one way, that it has to be.
And I want to encourage folks as well to remember that there's the facilities, equipment, and other resources document where it is appropriate to discuss in general terms without any quantification, but in general terms, if you're going to host an institute somewhere, what are the facilities that will be available for hosting?
Certainly. The follow-up question about previous markers for success do not have to be limited to NSF funding. Absolutely. You may have gotten funding from a foundation or a different federal agency. Absolutely. Or it may have been something that wasn't funded. you know, that's certainly very reasonable too. Maybe you've done a lot of workshops at AERA or something like that, and can use, you know, some of that to support your case.
And I'm going to go on this a little bit in order to make a point that you haven't asked about, but you might. It could be the case that one of the things you decide you're going to have as an outcome of your institute is that participants will write NSF proposals that will be successful. Now, that would not be appropriate for all institutes. Absolutely not. And it's not an expectation. But you might decide that for the particular group you're going to work with and the particular skills they're going to have, they would be able to do that. And in that case, sure, then your experience writing successful NSF proposals would be relevant, but it would be not relevant, you know, if that wasn't a goal of your institute. I'm trying to think here, Jessica, of the common questions that we often get. And the first one was how many people, right? We always get that one. So I was expecting that. I also feel like we get the question, how much detail do I need about what people are going to learn? And a lot, a lot of detail. You know, you think of reviewers, they're kind of in their mind, they're imagining, they're experiencing this institute. They really want to know, what will people be experiencing? You know, what's the time frame? How will the knowledge be delivered and assessed? Or the new skills? Do people have enough time to develop them and practice them? So they're really thinking carefully about, does this make sense pedagogically? And so, you know, that Jessica said syllabus, right? It is really like thinking, what will we do? And the mentoring components, what will be the content of the mentoring sessions, right? Typically isn't enough just to say, we'll have 6 mentoring meetings throughout the year. Well, about what? And how will the mentor be supported in being a good mentor? Those kinds of details can really help reviewers understand a proposal and see what you intend for the participants to experience. Anything else occur to you, Jessica?
Yeah, I was trying to think of that too, the same thing. So I think another question we get is about kind of scope of the content that's covered in a particular institute, because when you look through the institutes we funded, we have some that are more narrow in terms of their scope and some that are a little bit more broad. And I think, so that kind of shows that we are very open to both. I think, I would say a pitfall that sometimes we see for those institutes that are a little bit broader in terms of their content is that they go too broad and they want to do everything. And so they want to teach folks about, you know, qualitative research and quantitative research and advanced methods and this and that. And the thought of that is just kind of overwhelming to me, right? Like, how are you going to accomplish all of this in one institute? So broad is certainly welcome, and there are topics that are served that way. But just think about being able to be sure that you can describe and you can that you can actually achieve kind of the goals that you set forward. So it's sometimes easier to write a more narrow one, but there is a lot of broad, you know, appeal to a broader one, but you still have to rein yourself in there and think about, you know, being able to really clearly describe what it is that you are going to accomplish and how you are going to get there. Question that came in, yes, thank you, Catherine, that was submitted ahead of time, was asking about topics that are qualitative in nature absolutely would be welcome within the Institute proposal. So there are more that are more quantitative in nature. However, we have funded several that are more qualitative in nature. I'm thinking of the Metasyntheses Institute that we have funded in the past, but absolutely, we're open. It's really you providing a compelling case to us of why this topic is important and is going to help build the capacity of STEM education researchers. I'm trying to rack my brain for other questions that folks have asked us too, Jennifer. Yeah, George.
I have a second question. Can you tell us more about the evaluation panel, what folks' expertise, or as much as you are able to share, of course?
I'm sorry,
specialists?
I missed the first part, George. Can you repeat the first
peer?
part again?
Yeah, I'm wondering about the peer review panel. Are they journalists? Are they specialists? Are they STEM education researchers? Are they, educational technology researchers? I just want to get a better sense of who these folks are.
That's a great question. Part of it depends on the panel composition, right? So the proposals that are on a particular panel and thinking about making sure that we're bringing in folks who have expertise in these different areas, right? So maybe folks who have expertise not only in the methods, or we might bring in folks who, would be potential participants who can talk to it from a participant perspective as well. But I will say we often have kind of all of those folks that you mentioned. So we'll have methodologists, quant and qual in the room. We'll have STEM education researchers in the room. We may have discipline-based education researchers in the room to really try and get an overall sense from different communities, about the value of these particular institutes. Jennifer, I'm guessing you have things to add on that.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking through, and your first comment really, it depends very much on the proposals. So we don't know who the reviewers will be until we see what the proposals are. And then we're trying our best, as Jessica said, to make sure we've got the right expertise and the different perspectives that will give a fair view of the proposals. And we often try to have people who have had in the past run successful institutes, because that's a whole skill set. Jolene or Eric, I'm wondering if people have asked you things about the institutes that you think we could talk about here. Jessica and I may be too close to it to do a really good job of getting what are those initial questions people have.
Well, Eric and I are both new to BCSER. So we haven't encountered the actual review process yet. So I don't have anything that I can think of off the top of my head, nor that, because I monitor the email alias. I haven't gotten that many questions across that. So I'm really just kind of listening here, but I do want to emphasize what Jessica said before about the boundaries of your work. It's really important, and this is in any NSF proposal, that you establish those boundaries earlier. We are doing this. We are not doing all of this, or we're not doing just this. We're doing this, and what the boundaries of your work are, and to set those early and often in the proposal, because otherwise people feel like they don't understand the structure of what you're doing. Again, that notion of you're doing too much or too little. It's just really great to set those boundaries. This is what we're doing, and this is what it's going to look like, and have that be in your first or second paragraph, so people aren't scrambling. And I just today was talking with some folks that had put in a proposal in a very different program, but where the reviewer said it was halfway through the proposal before I really understood what they were doing. So, getting out right in front what it is your institute is going to do, I think would be key.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add, but just thinking about it, because I am very new, but thinking about it as a, reviewer, as you're writing this, think about like, okay, here's my syllabus, to use Jessica's phrase. Send it to 4 or 5 people, and ask them, would you be interested in taking this class? Or this, a workshop that contained this amount of material? Does that feel overwhelming? Does that feel too narrow? So that you can kind of get some perspective outside of your own, because you've been thinking about it for so long, and some real world sort of feedback about, no, this is not going to work, or this sounds really good. Maybe add this thing.
I think the last thing that I would want to emphasize is the one pager. Like, we want to talk to folks. So actually, I find these conversations to be really interesting when we get to have these 30-minute conversations with folks, and it kind of gives us a heads up as to what might be coming in, right? And it's really an opportunity for us to think through it with you and to think about, oh, this is a fit for Fixer, or yeah, I don't know if this is a great fit. Like, how can you, maybe rethink this or whatever it may be. But please, we want to talk to you. And so, definitely if you're interested, send in a one pager, and we will be happy to set up a meeting to chat through your ideas. Yes, I'm seeing the question in the chat about required levels of, it's not a level 1 or 2. Nope, there's no levels in this. The maximum budget is $1 million. So just be sure that, you justify your budget and it matches the scope of your project.
I just thought of one more question that has come up. And that is the issue of, we're going to develop materials, and we're not sure what that means in terms of data sharing. What kind of plan do we need to have to give people access to materials? So be thinking about that. In your proposal, it should be clear to reviewers what you will be doing with materials that were developed with taxpayer dollars. People just forget to say anything about it, and reviewers wonder, will this be shared? Under what conditions? With whom? So don't forget, these institutes typically do have a materials development aspect to them.
We are coming up on the top of the hour, so this is your opportunity for one last question, should you have one. I'll give a quiet wait time here. But seeing none, you are also welcome to follow up with email, as Jolene mentioned. She is the point person to that email alias, and she does a great job of dispersing it to the program officer with relevant expertise. So definitely do follow up. And thank you so much for joining and for hanging in there today. We really appreciate it.